Hi YouTube, this is Evie. Welcome back to my channel, and today I have another video for all. This one is again going to be about age play. Specifically, I'm going to be talking about dark age play. So consider this your warning. I am going to be talking about things that could be triggering for a lot of people, that could be upsetting or hard to hear, or just bring up bad emotions or bad memories. So please be aware of that when you're watching this video. This is going to be a sensitive topic for a lot of people. So what I'm going to be talking about specifically is I'm going to be talking about different kinds of roles and scenes you could have that involve dark age play, the reasons why people actually participate in dark age play and what people get out of it, and how to actually talk to your partner about doing dark age play and how to approach them and negotiate for a scene that involves dark age play in a healthy and constructive way. And something that I want to get out there for sort of the rest of this video is that yes, dark age play does have a very sexual focus normally, and in a lot of scenes, that's what makes it dark. That's what makes a lot of people squicked out about it, because it is weird to think about somebody who is like a daddy who's maybe like 35 taking advantage of their actual 5-year-old. That is a weird thing to think about, and it's a weird thing to play with, and that's why it's very important to be able to negotiate these kinds of things in a healthy way that's not going to accidentally trigger anybody, that's not actually going to accidentally bring up any sort of bad negative emotions. That being said, there are a lot of dark age play scenes that have no sexual content to them at all, and they're still pretty damn dark. I'm going to be breaking up this video into two parts. I'm going to be talking about dark age play that is non-sexual and dark age play that is sexual. And I'm going to be going over the non-sexual scenes right now. So even though dark age play can have a very sexual focus, it doesn't mean that all of the dark age play scenes out there are sexually focused. So, for example, you could have a scene where the kid is kidnapped and thrown in the back of a car. You could have a scene where a kid is getting beaten by an angry mom or an angry dad, and it's just getting, spatula after spatula broken on their ass because they're just being spanked so many times. You could have a scene where you're doing something with breath play or waterboarding and a kid is like being drowned in a bathtub. You could have a scene where you're getting locked in a closet for 24 hours. You could have a scene that is also kidnapping, but instead of just being locked in the back of a car, you're actually locked in a jail cell for a couple of days. You could have a scene where a kid is actually scared of the monster under the bed, and the monster under the bed is real. There are a lot of scenes out there that don't have any sex in them at all, or any sexual overtones, that are really, really dark, and it is just as important to talk about these things and negotiate with your partner for the non-sexual aspects of dark age play as it is for the sexual aspects. You could also have non-sexual scenes that are not just between an adult and a kid, but between two kids. Maybe one of them is between two schoolgirls and one of them is a really bad influence. Maybe a kid is being forced to join a gang. Maybe it's something where a kid is getting beat up or bullied because of something that they have as a personal identifier, like if they're queer or lesbian or transgender, or maybe they just have red hair and glasses or freckles or something like that, and kids just beat them up for it anyways. You could have a scene where maybe your older sibling is just picking on you and just like verbally degrading you really badly. You could have like a fear play scene where you get lost in the store and you really actually get lost in the store and you can't find your parent and none of the adults will help you. There are so many different layers and elements you can play with dark age play that involve things like fear, that involve breath play, that involve caging and confinement. It can have so many different overlaps with so many other kinks out there. It is actually really amazing how much age play can overlap into other kinks, and that's something that I think is really helpful when it comes to actually introducing people to age play, is incorporating their other kinks that you know that they have into the scene, because that sort of adds a level of comfort to it, and that adds sort of a level of enjoyment to it. Now, there are also, even within sexual dark age play, a lot of different varieties. So you could have a coerced or a forced sexual scene, or you could have a consensual sex scene. So for consensual sex scenes, I tend to think of sort of two different things. You could have like an incest scene that's sort of like innocent fumblings around sexual encounters between like cousins or siblings or twins or something like that. Or you could have it be where like a kid is sort of like in Lolita, but like if Lolita didn't have an unreliable narrator where like the kid did actually want to have sex with their parent. On the flip side of that, when it comes to coerced and forced sexual dark age play, you can have Lolita where it's the same narrator and Lolita is really being brutalized and her mom did really get murdered and like all this other crazy stuff that does really happen in Lolita actually being played out in a real scene. You could also have a scene where maybe it's like between you and your role playing out like your first boyfriend like coercing you into sex. You could have it be where maybe a grandparent or an uncle or a parent coerces you into a sex, or a nanny or a priest, really any sort of adult figure in power that is coercing somebody who's younger than them into a sexual act. You could have things where you're like an underage prostitute. You could have things where you're actually being like extorted for sex. Like you could have a teacher be like, I'll give you a passing grade, but only if you do XYZ sexual thing. But when it comes to dark age play and it comes to all these sexual aspects, why do people actually want to do this? And I know that is a question that I have grappled with myself a lot. Age play used to squick me out so badly, and I realized that age play, because it plays on all those fears and it plays on all those darknesses, it can help you resolve those fears. It can help you get through all of those past traumas. It can help you sort of resolve issues or misconceptions that you had about previous relationships or your understanding of the world. And especially when it comes to if you're doing it as part of a BDSM dynamic, there is something that is very inherently powerful about the relationship between a child and their parent, or a child and their grandparent, or a child and their teacher. Being able to play and warp with that can really test a BDSM relationship, and it can make that dynamic a lot stronger. At the same time, it can seem like the person who is the child or the person who is the bottom in the scene is the one who is being brutalized, the one who is being put through the most mental strain. Whereas I think in reality, a lot of times we don't account for the mental strain that is actually going through the top, that is actually going through the person who is the older person in the scene, because we see the children as the victims, and maybe in the scene they are, maybe they're not. But when it comes to the adult, we're not sympathizing with them like we would do with the child. We're not able to empathize with them. Whereas with the adult, the person who is actually the one who's being the abuser, being the kidnapper, being the rapist, being the pedophile, being the peeping Tom, you're participating in a role that is abhorred by society. You're participating in a role that is very difficult for you to be able to come back from and say, I am still a good person. And after you've done a scene like this, and you're the top or you're the bottom, whatever it is, no matter what role you participated in that scene, it is so, so, so very important, and I cannot stress this enough, and that's why I'm going to say it a million times. Very important to talk after you do a dark age play scene. Talk about what happened. Talked about, what went right, what went wrong, what you really liked, any sort of triggers that maybe came up that you weren't anticipating, any sort of things that maybe that were said or done that really upset you, or maybe that really turned you on, because it's dark age play and there's dark things happening, but people still find that kinky and people still find that hot. But even more important than talking after the scene is talking before the scene ever actually happens. Because you want to avoid as much as possible when you're doing a dark age play scene, or any scene for that matter, any sort of triggers that that person might have. You want to avoid any sort of sensitive areas, any sort of sensitive subjects that they're not ready or not able to address as part of a scene. So maybe you're negotiating with somebody and you really want to have a scene where they're your dirty, pervy uncle, and maybe they really had a dirty, pervy uncle, and they looked up to him for a really long time, and then they find out that they were dirty and pervy, and they don't want to play that kind of role. They don't want to be that kind of person. And being able to talk about that before a scene so that way you don't actually accidentally force your partner into doing something that they're not comfortable in participating with, so, so, so very important. And there are a million ways to work around things. So maybe they can't be your dirty uncle, but maybe they'll be your dirty aunt instead. But more than that, that is sort of anticipating that you're able to get to the point with your partner where you're able to negotiate for a scene. And I have plenty of other videos, I'll link them down below, where I've talked about actually negotiating for a scene. But when it comes to actually bringing up this specific kink, it can be very, very nerve-wracking if you're the person who wants to approach the subject, because it is something that is very looked down upon. It's something that's very, very misunderstood, and it's hard to able to approach it and be assured that your partner is still going to think of you the same afterwards. So what I would do if you're interested in doing this kind of scene with your partner is, first of all, probably not a good idea to have this be the first kind of scene you ever have with your partner be dark age play, because it does play on so many different mental levels. Work your way up with different kinds of scenes beforehand. Get a level of familiarity and comfort with a specific partner first. Make sure that they're the kind of person that's actually a really healthy communicator, that provides aftercare in a way that is good for you, that is able to talk about their feelings and their problems when they come up. And when you do approach the subject, maybe ask them about their childhood, ask them about their parents, kind of get a sense for the sort of relationship that they have. Approach the subject of age play in a very general way. Ask them if they've heard about it, if they know what it is, if it's something that's interesting to them. And if it's something maybe that I'm kind of interested in, or maybe like, yeah, it's something I'm really into. You can kind of go from there. But if it's something they're like, oh, no, age play, that's gross. Like, you might want to reconsider kind of going on from that step, because if they already think age play in general is gross, if you try to approach them about something that's very specific and very dark, they're probably going to reject you and it's probably not going to go well. But if things do go well and they're like, yeah, I'm actually pretty interested, you can start to talk more about the specifics of why you might be into age play, some examples of scenes that you've heard about or seen or participated in before that you thought were really awesome. Just make sure that you are all on the same page, and make sure that you're not just like ranting at your partner the entire time. It can be very difficult if you're talking about something you sort of bottled up inside for a very long time to not just want to spew everything out to your partner all at once and let them know all of your dark, dirty desires. But that generally does not work very well when you're trying to negotiate with somebody. You want to kind of piecemeal a little bit. Try to pace yourself. Take not just a couple of days, but even a couple of weeks or a couple of months to kind of work up to that point in the relationship where you can get to the point where you're able to actually negotiate for a scene that you will be participating in. It is very important to kind of give yourself and your partner the time to sort of digest everything, to come to terms and to come to understandings about dark age play. Give them lots of good links, good resources, good things that they can read in order to learn more about age play. If they're not super familiar with it right off the bat, you can of course link to my channel if you want to, and I'll link some resources down below for good places to learn more about age play. But really, just take your time, take it slow. That is really sort of my general advice for BDSM and negotiating, regardless of what kind of scene it is, and especially for edge play as well. But that's really everything I wanted to talk about in this video. Dark age play can be a very deep and personal thing to participate in, so it's kind of hard to get into specifics without either squeaking myself out because I'm not an age player, or kind of getting too specific in a way that I think might be too much for this video. But again, I will leave links down below if you want to learn more about dark age play or age play in general. If you did like this video and found it helpful, please give it a thumbs up. I do make videos twice a week if you want to subscribe. I talk about BDSM, age play, pet play, all sorts of great stuff. And of course, any video suggestions you might have, please feel free to leave them down below. Any questions or comments you might have as well, always super welcome. And until I see you next time, have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.